are the top 30 players in my initial fantasy football rookie rankings for 2023 beyond Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. It's time to break it down right here and right now as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
Our Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. I have my top 30 rookie rankings up there. Yep, very early, looking at it right after the 2023 NFL Draft. Pretty obvious number one, a pretty solid number two. Bijan Robinson going to the Falcons is on top of the board, followed by Jahmyr Gibbs of the Lions. We'll break down those two guys and why they're so high and what we expect out of them in their rookie seasons first. Then we'll break down the rest of my top 30 over three segments here on the show. So good stuff here for you. We'll first look at the top seven, and these are the guys that we're going to be most excited about. Then look at guys that we want to draft, stash for specific purposes as backups, high upside type players. Then look at players we want to put on the waiver wire and look at them and put them on our radar here for potential pickups, depending on their situations developing for the positive for rookie production here in 2023. So sound good? We're going to break that all down for you. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. Subscribe and follow for free wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's dive right in. Bijan Robinson, what a fit for the Falcons. He's going to be their lead back. Sorry, Tyler Algier, Cordell Patterson. It is now the Bijan Robinson show in Atlanta. He should get a high volume here. He's a special all-around back. So looking forward to seeing what Bijan can do. High effective running game as well as high volume. They were very run-heavy last year with Arthur Smith. They had 4.9 yards per carry with Algier right at that number as well. And a very good offensive line. We know with Jake Matthews anchoring the left side. You have Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry with fresh, new, more lucrative contracts here. So they're set up nicely up front for run blocking. They are run-first team here. Bijan Robinson going to the coordinator / coach who was working with Derrick Henry, and we know what numbers Derrick Henry's put up in fantasy football as an absolute stud runner. And what the difference is here is that Robinson could also be a very effective receiver. So Cordell Patterson, we know they've extended him quite a bit late in his career, converting him to a wide receiver. Tyler Algier is a pretty good player, but very limited in the pass game, more of a power runner here. So Bijan's going to take over. So those are going to be the kind of the situational backups that you look at. So Bijan, high volume. How good is this situation? He's a high-end RB1. That's right. He is worth going in the top 5, the top 10 overall in fantasy football drafts. Barring any injury to him, it's a very good situation. I know the Falcons' defense is a bit in progress. They made some changes, try to get better there. But they're going to stick with Robinson again. He's also game script proof because he's such a good receiver and can be explosive in that aspect, really rack up the catches and half-point PPR and yards and opportunities there to score as well. So Bijan Robinson locked in as a top 10 pick here and a top 5 running back in fantasy football immediately as a rookie. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs is not far behind. The Lions end up with him instead of Bijan Robinson. The Lions made us feel a little bit better about this by moving DeAndre Swift to the Eagles. So Swift has some RB1 potential there in Philadelphia ahead of Rashad Penny. Now you get Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit. Only David Montgomery behind him. They signed Montgomery free agency. I don't think it's going to be an even split between Gibbs and Montgomery. I just don't see it. You don't trade up and get to number 12 pretty high for a running back there and get that position if you're not going to use him as a workhorse here. So I think David Montgomery is valuable because he can do a lot of things Gibbs can, just at a less explosive level that we've seen from his days with the Bears. So you're really looking at Jahmyr Gibbs. Upside is definitely RB1. That means putting him in the top 12, but his floor is RB2. So we're talking about 13 to 15, somewhere in that range. He's going to get the volume. The Lions are going to feed him. They have a great offensive line, great offense overall with Jared Goff in that passing game. So opportunities to score. We know more than 2,000 yards A lot of touchdowns there between Jamal Williams, and DeAndre Swift vacated from last year. Montgomery's not going to cut into those too much. We know there'll be a little bit of touchdown regression in general from the running back scoring because Jamal Williams scored at such a high rate. But still, you're looking at 10 touchdowns easily for Gibbs here, I think. And the scrimmage yards, maybe Montgomery cuts into it a little bit, but Gibbs is going to be the finisher and scorer. He's going to be the better pass catcher as well, more explosive back. So I see maybe a 60-40 situation. And in this particular offense, that could be very nice here for Gibbs' production. So we're going to go conservative estimate, RB2, right outside of the top 12, making sure that Montgomery is not going to steal the key touches. But once we get word of that, he's right up there, not too far behind Robinson as an RB1. All right, let's go to our first wide receiver. It's Jordan Addison. He gets to play the slot role vacated by Adam Thielen in Minnesota. So of all the receivers taken, he's got the most direct path to producing. I know they have TJ Hawkinson. They have one KJ Osborne as well at wide receiver to help Justin Jefferson. But Addison, first-round pick, they wanted to replace Thielen with a little bit more speed, quickness, on top of the technical route running, getting open quickly in the slot. Jordan Addison provides all that, so really like Addison here as the top receiver on the board, and we're going to look at him as a wide receiver 3. Thielen had that kind of value. He did score quite a bit of touchdowns and was a key red zone target for Kirk Cousins. That might be harder for Addison, but he does have that history with Pittsburgh and USC. So, again, Jordan Addison, good landing spot for him with the Vikings, going to play off Justin Jefferson. Going to see a lot of single coverage. I think he'll pass Osborne in the key target pecking order there, right there with Hawkinson. So watch out for Addison, just very technically sound, good number 2 overall, especially working from the inside, taking advantage of all the attention Jefferson will demand outside. So I like it. I'm going conservative, however, drafting him as a wide receiver 4, some wide receiver 3 upside. All right, next guy up is Anthony Richardson, the Colts quarterback out of Florida. He went number 4 overall in the draft. Now, I love Anthony Richardson because I think they're going to work him in a little bit like the Eagles did early in the career of Jalen Hurts as a runner, move him around, get that aspect. He has a high floor as a runner. I think he has willingness to run as well, which helps. And then on top of that, you have a very strong arm, can push the ball downfield. You got decent weapons, Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce is the lead receivers. Now you have Josh Downs also replacing Paris Campbell, more depth at tight end with Will Mallory. So all kinds of weapons, also playing off a very strong running game to help Richardson's own running with Jonathan Taylor. So the matter of Richardson is just getting a shot, but I think the high floor is there. Can he displace Gardner Minshew? Let's hope the Colts give him every opportunity to do that. He's Shane Steichen's type of quarterback. Very mobile, explosive runner, can also finish with power with his size and also throw downfield pretty deep here. So Jalen Hurts clone, let's hope that in fantasy football we're happening to see here with Richardson. It may not all come to fruition right now, but there'll be flashes of that production should he get that opportunity over Minshew. At the next wide receiver spot here in my rankings at number 5, I have Quentin Johnston. I think because I know Keenan Allen and Mike Williams have a lot of durability issues, and we know that the targets can pivot pretty easily. Last year, Justin Herbert threw a lot to Josh Palmer, early DeAndre Carter before he got hurt. So when you look at that, I mean, there's going to be opportunities. Allen is now 31. Mike Williams seems to be always hurt. Johnston can kind of fill into the Mike Williams big play outside role, so something to look at. And I think that's what's going to happen here, where he's going to see a little bit more. You can also play Allen dedicated in the slot as well, so that's going to give Johnson opportunities to the outside if he can beat out Palmer as a first-round pick. So I think he's a closer and a clearer path to wide receiver targets there than some of the other receivers, except for Addison in this class. All right, the number 6 player on the board, Jackson Smith-Njigba here among my fantasy football rookies for 2023. I like Jackson Smith-Njigba a lot, but Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, there was a lot of production behind them last year. Part of it is because they didn't have anyone behind them, but they are also very durable, unlike Allen and Williams in Los Angeles. So these guys are going to be on the field often. It's the question of how often do they open it up and throw the ball to involve a third receiver. We know their tight end is a bit by committee with Noah Fant and Colby Parkinson, so nothing really threatening there. D. Eskridge would be their next receiver, so nothing that we worry about there. So it's really him getting on the field, 11 personnel, getting enough volume between Metcalf and Lockett from Geno Smith, and also worrying about the running game now is a little bit deeper with Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh in the mix behind Kenneth Walker. So really the opportunities are the question. The talent on Jackson Smith-Njigba, not even a question. And I think you might see his bigger value for your dynasty leaguers when Lockett hangs it up, he's going to be on the other side of 30 soon. That's going to help here with JSN getting some really key targets and play here in Seattle. So I don't see the biggest impact coming this year, but definitely a high upside stash for years to come. That Seahawks offense playing off Metcalf. All right, one more player will round out my top 7. It is Bryce Young, the quarterback that came from Alabama, number 1 overall to the Panthers. Decent weapons, we talked about it. DJ Chark, Adam Thielen, and Terrace Marshall Jr. as key wide receivers here. You've got Hayden Hurst at tight end and decent backfield options there as well. So when you look at Bryce Young, he can also run. So he has a little bit of that floor to him that Richardson has. He's not maybe going to take off and run purely here. He wants to still establish himself as a pocket passer with some athleticism to move, as well as leading and getting this Panthers team turned around. But there's some numbers to be had for Bryce Young. Nothing spectacular, but we looked at it around the 25 touchdown mark. Yeah, we could see that being a conservative estimate. I think Richardson just gives you more upside because he can do more on the ground immediately, and he's going to be more unleashed to do that here in Indianapolis with Steichen. All right, there's a look at the top 7. Then we'll round out the other players that you want to look at. 10 more draftable players in fantasy football so far, 2023 among the rookies. Then a whole bunch of guys to watch there. We'll look at that for you as well. 13 good names to watch there that don't want to draft, invest that fantasy football draft pick in yet, but definitely want to have them on the radar for early waiver wire pickups. So all that kind of good stuff still coming on the show. Make a fast break to only one place during the NBA playoffs. That is FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and there's many reasons why. Because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. It's awesome to go to FanDuel and play because they have great promotions every day with your action. It's a safe and secure app that you can download on your phone and put your bets on instantly, and you can get paid instantly. Once that goes through and you win a bet, you're going to see that money come through very fast. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action in the NBA than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. You get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is an official sporting betting partner of the NBA, as well as a proud sponsor here of Locked On Fantasy Football. We thank them for sponsoring the podcast. And again, check it out, FanDuel. It's no time than right now to get in on the action there as NBA heats up with Warriors-Lakers. What a game last night. It'll continue here with a great series. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to more NFL stuff coming here from FanDuel down the line of the season. All right, thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. Every day is a special shout-out to you. You know who you are. You check out our show every day. Tomorrow on the show, we will look at some updated rankings there, look at quarterbacks, how they kind of stack up here after the 2023 NFL Draft. So we'll do that for you on the show. But if you are just checking out the show, we hope you become an everyday or check out our off-season and in-season fantasy football analysis. Straight, no nonsense, to the point, breaking down for you here on the show. Speaking of which, let's dive right into more rookie rankings. At number 8, I've got Zach Charbonnet there. A big surprising pick here in the second round by the Seahawks, but I like the player a lot. And the Seahawks have had all kinds of injury issues at running back. There, Kenneth Walker was slowed down, we know, going into the season with the sports hernia. You had Rashad Penny was a walking durability issue. Chris Carson had to return or retire because of injury, so return to inactive duty here. So they are a little bit paranoid about getting their backs all sewed up and getting some backups, but they also didn't have a lot behind Kenneth Walker. They had to kind of replenish that. They didn't keep Travis Homer. Rashad Penny signed with the Eagles, so they need to replenish the depth here. But a high pick here, second round for the Seahawks, so maybe freaking out some people that, why do they have Kenneth Walker in the second round? They're going to replace him with Charbonnet. No, Charbonnet is a good power back. I think he'll relieve Walker a little bit. He could cut into his touchdown total a little bit as well, but he's a plus handcuff. He's plugged and played with Walker. You can have a big, big role there. And Charbonnet, I don't think is going to have a big role while Walker's healthy, maybe 25% of the work there, but Charbonnet would shoot up to about 80% should Walker be on the shelf. So a lot of good things to consider there. They're also got a receiving change of pace back in Kenny McIntosh. He's going to cut into the receiving work for both backs. So a little bit of crowd now that we didn't want developing necessarily behind Kenneth Walker. But Charbonnet, definitely a high-end handcuff, and that's what you have to treat him. I think standalone value is just too risky here, given the depth of that backfield. All right, the next player on my list is C.J. Stroud, and he wants to be a straight-up pocket passer, so the willingness to run may hurt his value a little bit with the Texans, but It's also 49ers friendly offense, so you can put up some numbers. We've also seen Jimmy Garoppolo not exactly light it up in fantasy in this particular offense. So something to look at. But CJ Stroud, just the talent, some of the weapons around here that you can examine. So really sometimes with the quarterback, it just comes with the talent, being able to exploit matchups early as a rookie. Devin Achane is next. He's the running back that went to the Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins, I just simply don't trust Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr. stay healthy, as well as Myles Gaskin. So an opportunity there. Remember, like Big Danny talked about it, really was excited about that. So watch out for Achane potentially having a role there, something to look at, stash behind Mostert and Wilson, two guys that are always seeming to be hurt. Doesn't matter if they're San Francisco or Miami. The next player that's on my list is Zay Flowers. Now, bit of a crowd all of a sudden with the Ravens receiving core with Odell Beckham Jr. and Nelson Aguilar joining Devin Duvernay and James Prochet, and also having Rashad Bateman as the first rounder a few years ago as the number one, and Mark Andrews at tight end. So we want to be careful of that. Zay Flowers needs to carve out a big role. He needs to displace Beckham, see some key targets there. They also have to open up the offense a little bit with Todd Monken to give us the passing volume we want out of the Ravens to go in that direction. So a lot of things that we have to look at with the chain, but definitely a good stash on your bench to see what happens, especially if you've got a Wilson or Mostert investment. So looking at that, those are guys that you're definitely targeting. You also look at Spears here. When you look at Tyjae Spears out of Tennessee, I think he's a guy that from Tulane has shown he can be a change of pace back a little bit more than that. So a high-end handcuff here. So the chain is the handcuff you're looking at in the Miami backfield. Spears is a little bit more direct path. There's only Hassan Haskins between him and Derrick Henry here. Henry could break down here. Haskins limited kind of power back. Spears gives them a little bit different element. The change of pace receiving ability. So watch out for Tyjae Spears. We know Dontrell Hilliard a couple years ago in that committee with Dante Foreman replacing Henry had some effectiveness here. They could be flipping the offense a little bit more pass friendly. That would favor Spears as well over Derrick Henry, who again could break down any time. They would really open the door for Spears. Tank Bigsby, interesting landing spot right now. He's listed as the number 2 running back to Travis Etienne Jr. in Jacksonville. D'Ernest Johnson, kind of the swing back up, they signed him. So a little bit of crowd there all of a sudden with Bigsby, a straight up power runner from Auburn that you can put in the early downs, might cut into Etienne's work. We know he's a little bit slight. They haven't worked him as much as they could in the passing game, but I think that could increase here with Bigsby now. The power looks where Etienne doesn't have to be pounded a little bit. So somebody watch out there with that development. But D'Ernest Johnson also a capable backup behind both these guys, so that would hurt it. But Bigsby definitely worth a draft here late. Draft pick late in most fantasy football drafts. Michael Mayer's next. I'm not really recommending tight ends into year 2, and it's not the easiest situation there. It's a wide receiver potential-centric team right now. Jacoby Myers joining Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow with the Raiders, but you do have only Austin Hooper and O.J. Howard at tight end, so we'll see how it plays out with Mayer. It is a Josh McDaniels offense where we saw Rob Gronkowski thrive, so something to look at there as well. Sam Laporta comes next. The Lions have a void at tight end. Their number 1 used to be Brock Wright. We'll see how they work to the tight end a little bit more. They do have a lot of very good receivers in the running game, so we see there to see what Laporta can do, but definitely a draft pick as a tight end too, given that he's probably the default starter at some point over Brock Wright. Dalton Kincaid also worth drafting to see how the Bills use him. He could be a glorified slot here, given the way their draft went, and they got a guy named Shorter out there, Justin Shorter, to be their outside potential big target. He's a 6'4" guy, so not exactly the classic slot guy. They said goodbye to Isaiah McKenzie. So watch out for Dalton Kincaid maybe having a bit of a hybrid role with the Bills, but we want to wait and see there beyond that because they still have Dawson Knox in that number 1 spot at tight end. Finally, the last draftable player should be in the last round, but it's Jake Moody, the kicker of the 49ers. You got to look at it for sure. So really outstanding here with Jake Moody. I think he has a big leg that going to help you in fantasy football if you're still using kickers in your league. Evan McPherson, this is the type of player he can be immediately clutch. High-scoring team, put up some numbers. We know Robbie Gould finished in the top 12 amongst kickers last year. So definitely Jake Moody is draftable late as a kicker if you're still using that position in your leagues. All right, there you have a look at now these 17 draftable guys that you can look at here in the 2023 NFL draft as fantasy football rookies for the 2023 season. We'll get through those few other guys we want to put on the watch list for the waiver wire early pickups there in our final segment. Again, thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers, make sure you check us out tomorrow. We'll have an update on the quarterback rankings for you now that the rookies are in the mix. All right, time to close the show here in Locked On Fantasy Football, and we're going to break down the guys that you want to put on the watch list but not draft, and we'll go on them in rapid fashion here. Will Levis, we'll see if he starts over Ryan Tannehill or Malik Willis in Tennessee. He's got some decent weapons, including Treylon Burks and Chig Okonkwo from last year's draft, so something to watch. Will Levis, big arm, can run around a little bit as well, so put up some numbers. Any viable starting quarterback in a decent offense we need to consider. Luke Musgrave is now operating as the tight end number 1 for the Packers. Will he get enough chances here? You also have Tucker Kraft, their other draft pick, and they could just go to receivers a lot more. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs for Jordan Love. Kendre Miller was signed by the Saints, a double contingency plan here because he's a power runner, much the way Jamal Williams is, can finish drives really well and put up some points. And then you look at the other element of Kendre Miller, could also fill in if Alvin Kamara has to battle a suspension here. So something to look at there. So he's a nice talent to look at, but let's watch him on the waiver wire. Another good guy to look at is Zach Evans. He went to the Rams as running back. Again, change of pace back that looks like a power back more so and can produce that way. So maybe developing ahead of Kyron Williams as the preferred handcuff to Cam Akers. We'll see how that plays out. Jalen Hyatt joins a very crowded Giants wide receiver space, but he stands out for his size and big playability. You have a lot of other guys, Sterling Shepard, Isaiah Hodgins, and Darius Slayton. Slayton is maybe the outside guy, but Shepard and Hodgins, some of these guys are kind of superfluous against each other in their type of roles, but they need a field stretcher who can make some big plays. Daniel Jones is a big arm. So you look at Jalen Hyatt, a good little stash / look at here, all waiver wire. The next comes Hendon Hooker. He has the keys to a fantastic offense should something happen to Jared Goff, and Goff could break down. But next year, Hooker will be big, obviously, with some of the weapons, Amon-Ra St. Brown and the rest he's going to be inheriting in Detroit. You have a receiver that went to the Panthers a little bit early, Jonathan Mingo, but is an opportunity there if DJ Chark and Adam Thielen can't stay healthy to emerge as a number 1 type there, with Terrace Marshall being the complementary receiver, so we're going to watch that. You have Marvin Mims, no movement on Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton. Now Judy's more likely to be moved at some point. Maybe it doesn't happen this year, but Mims, big playmaker after the catch and stretching field, someone to look at there. You have Jaden Reed next. We were a little bit worried about him. It's funny, we did get the word that the Jets did sign Randall Cobb, so they're trying to find a new type of Cobb there. Jaden Reed could be the guy between Watson and Doubs here. There's other guys, the tight ends, and Dontavius Wicks and some of their other options at receiver take some time to develop. Next up is Rashee Rice. He's going to have to battle Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Sky Moore, and Kadarius Toney for a key role there, but they did lose Juju Smith-Schuster as a big slot. Rashee Rice is a biggie as a possession receiver, can go get open all over the field. So something to look at there. Kayshon Boutte, the Patriots depth chart pretty weak at wide receiver. Will someone emerge? I mean, they just said goodbye to N'Keal Harry. They need somebody to come through. Kayshon Boutte is the type of receiver inside-outside with his size and technical abilities with some speed and quickness that can be very effective for Mac Jones. Then we have Roschon Johnson. We talked about him a little bit when we broke down the round 4 through 7 picks. He was the top offensive skill pick in round 4 for the Bears. I like his power skill set here and what he can do in the early downs of that offense. And finally, Josh Downs of the Colts. We'll see what role he can have here, but Paris Campbell, remember, was a sleeper last year. He essentially replaces that spot between Pittman and Pierce, and if you get the big arm of Richardson in there, it's going to open up the field for some bigger plays as well. So there you have it. There's a breakdown now of my top 20 fantasy football rankings. You can check more about that at sportingnews.com. We'll get you ready slowly for the season. A lot of off-season left to go, but we're going to stay with you. Locked On Fantasy Football, bringing you really good insight and detail that you need to know coming off the big event. So we're really excited about that. Our next thing coming up is a schedule release. We will have next a look at the quarterback rankings. We'll have an update on those here. I'd like to do our updates, and now we have some more fodder after the draft. So thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Follow, subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, a special shout out to you. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Have a great day, and this has been a look at our 2023 early rookie rankings at Sporting News.